welcome to the Handsell. I'm Ron Hogan. We're at Book Culture in Morningside Heights today, and my guest is Ed Park, who is the author of Personal Days, and he's an editor at a couple different places. And actually, let's talk about what you've been doing as an editor lately.
So lately I've been, for the past year and a half almost, I've been the literary editor at Amazon's publishing arm here in New York. We're here today at Book Culture to celebrate Jenny Davidson's book, The Magic Circle. So she's one of my authors. Jake Arnott, The House of Rumor, and A.L. Kennedy. So that's been a new thing for me. I've never edited books before. I've been a magazine editor with Believer and editing the literary section of the Village Voice, but this was sort of could I edit a really long piece of writing? And
what's been the biggest adjustment there for you, like from going from magazine pieces to editing book-length projects?
It's sort of, in a way, I've never been a fiction editor per se, but I've taught fiction writing, so I think I bring a lot of that to it. But it's about the length, and how do you put together a novel that keeps the momentum going and keeps the reader interested, and that's been a lot of fun and challenging too. But I'm really happy with the way the books have come out, and we're just starting to see them, coming out, appearing in the real world, and that's been really gratifying.
Fantastic. And the way the Handsell works is that people send me lists of books that they've enjoyed reading, and my guest stars and I come up with books that they might like to read next. And today's list comes anonymously via Tumblr, and it has 3 classics of book-length nonfiction on them. Bill Buford's Among the Thugs, In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, and Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion. And yeah, I mean, this is such an all-star list that in one sense it's kind of easy to come up with answers to that, but on the one sense it's also kind of hard to come up with answers to that.
Yeah.
In terms of how do you deal with 3 all-star books? And so I'm curious to see what are some of the books that you came up with.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you say Joan Didion, I actually think of Renata Adler, and the reason is because when I was in high school, there was a Lloyd Cole and the Commotions album called Rattlesnakes, and the song Rattlesnakes was his sort of interpretation of an image in Joan Didion's Play It As It Lays. And there was a song called Speedboat, which took its title from Renata Adler's novel. And I didn't know who either of these writers were, so I immediately read, I guess I was such a fan, I read the Didion, and I found a copy of Speedboat. And I liked both of them, but it was Speedboat that really kind of stayed with me. And every couple of years I would think about it or run across a used copy somewhere and snap it up and give it away. And the timing is actually really great because New York Review Books has just brought out, after many years of being out of print, a nice edition of Speedboat. Guy Trebay, who I used to work with at the Village Voice, has done the afterword, and it's. I guess I would say if you like Didion, I have a strong feeling you will like Adler's writing. They're not exactly the same, but I think Adler's writing. Speedboat came out in '76, I believe, and they're sort of both at their peak, maybe. There's a great picture that was in New York Magazine, I believe, where you see both of them together, and but something about Speedboat. I mean, if I can. One of the reasons why I keep thinking about it is after writing my own book, Personal Days, which came out a few years ago, for some reason I kept thinking of the tone of Speedboat, and I actually hadn't looked at it for years, and the way she organizes it is actually unconsciously the way I organized a lot of the first chunk of my book, these kind of anecdotal, each chapter is broken up into two paragraph long fragments, and they're kind of self-contained. They're almost like these, prose poems is maybe too precious a word, but sometimes the narrator doesn't even enter into those. They're just kind of these, often funny but very sharply observed scenes of sort of New York journalistic life that I guess stayed with me, and reading it again, I was just struck by how well it's held up. I mean, I truly think it's a classic, and I'm very happy that it's now out.
Yeah, and I think for somebody who gives us a list of great nonfiction, that this is a very good transition into the world of fiction. It's not so fictional in its tone. The tone, I think, is really key here, that it's a kind of voice that meshes very well with the voices that this person had identified. But you did also come up with a nonfiction recommendation, I believe.
For Didion?
There was another book that you had come up with.
Oh, did I? Well, this is actually based on. Did you mention Capote? Is that?
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
This was going to play off the Capote.
Okay, this plays off the Capote.
Okay, so the Capote was In Cold Blood, and you kind of know what happens in Cold Blood, and it's not like a surprise, but it's the telling that kind of fascinates us. And I want to recommend this in a way, this very old book called this title is the Memoirs of this one is titled The Memoirs of Lady Hyegyong. I have other translations that call it I guess the traditional Korean title is the Hanjungnok. There's another translation called like Memories of a Korean Princess, and I mean this is kind of the authoritative one, and they have 8 copies of it here. And just briefly, it's written in the I believe the late 18th century by a woman whose husband was the crown prince of one of the great kings of Korea's Yi dynasty, and she is telling. I believe she's writing these memoirs. They're 4 separate texts. She's writing them for her. I believe her grandson, to understand what happened to him, to his grandfather, her husband, and he was anointed the crown prince, but for various reasons he and his father just could not get along, and at a certain point he's clearly become insane and sort of having these wild orgies and murdering people and all this sort of atrocious stuff, but there's this huge communication breakdown between the king and his son, and what we know about it going into it is that the fate of the crown prince, whose name is Prince Sado, is that his father orders him to get into this very small rice chest, because if I'm remembering correctly, you cannot spill royal blood. So instead, he has the son go into this rice chest, where he dies 8 days later, and that is sort of this, incredible tragedy. And she is trying to explain this to him. The writing is just, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. I just want to read. There's something. This is just the very opening where she's talking about when she was young. From the time I came to the palace as a child, each morning and evening I exchanged letters of greeting with my parents, and many of those letters should have remained with my family. However, upon my departure, my father cautioned me, it is not right that letters from the outside should be scattered about the palace, nor would it be proper for you to write of anything at length, aside from simple words of greeting. It would be best if, after reading the news from home, you wrote us on the same sheet of paper. As he instructed, I wrote to them on the top margin of the letters that Mother faithfully sent twice each day. Father's letters, as well as those of my brothers and sisters, were answered in the same way. Father also cautioned my family not to strew the letters from the palace about the house. Thus my family gathered all my letters, and at regular intervals washed away all that was written. Hence none of those writings remained in my family's possession. I just love that she opens with that image of like a whole phantom correspondence, like washing away the letters, and really what she's doing here is this act of this incredible act of remembrance. And it's I'm not a Korean history scholar, but it's just gorgeously written, incredibly heartbreaking. I feel like it's Shakespearean in the dimensions of its tragedy. I believe in a British translation I have one of the blurbs, which I never quite understood, called it like a Korean pale fire, which obviously is catnip to me. And I would I think about this book all the time, and it's really stayed with me since I read it like 20 years ago.
That sounds really amazing. I can't wait to check that out myself. The book that I came up with for this list is a new nonfiction book, a memoir called A Long Day at the End of the World by Brent Hendricks. And you may remember an incident about 10 years ago where there was a crematory down in Georgia, and it turned out that the man who ran the crematory, rather than taking the people's bodies that were delivered to him and cremating them and giving people back the remains, he had actually sort of saved more than 300 bodies and sent people back fake cremains, and then stored the bodies on the premises of the crematory and in the woods behind his facility, so that when they found it, there were literally, as I say, more than 300 bodies all over the place. And Brent Hendricks' father was one of those bodies. And what Hendricks does is he's writing about a trip that he makes to go back to the site of that crematory, actually back for the first time because he had never been there, just to sort of see this place for himself, not necessarily to identify his father's remains because that's probably impossible, but at least to be in that spot and to get some kind of closure, for lack of a better word, from it there. And it's a recounting of his family history, of a kind of cultural history, an investigation into the case of the crematory. And it's, I picked it because, with all the stuff that is in, say, the Capote and the Didion, and even the Buford to some extent, there is that sort of element of crime and darkness and that to it. And I thought that this book really got at that in a very beautiful way. I mean, Hendricks is a poet when he's not writing these kinds of nonfiction things, and so the things he does with language are really captivating as well. And it's a new nonfiction voice that I think will hold up pretty well to the three classic voices that this person gave us in her list. So there are some great recommendations for you. I know I'm actually going to be checking out the memoirs again, and like you, rereading Renata Adler for the first time in about 20 years. And if you've enjoyed those recommendations, or you would like some recommendations of books based on what you've enjoyed in the past, you can go to the Handsell.com/ask and send me a list of books that you've liked, and I will try to get another author or independent bookseller to help me come up with books that you will enjoy. I'm Ron Hogan, and this is Ed Park, and from Book Culture, thanks, and have a good day.